Very good idea. Дякую. So, dear guests, participants, interested people in our first forum of this afternoon, which will focus on reconstruction and energy security. I will not go now into the details of all what has been destroyed in Ukraine since February last year. It is tremendous. So the destructions are horrid. It's different from region to region. But for example, when I was traveling in August in Ukraine, I met some energy experts, also companies, non-governmental organizations. And the figures I collected about the situation of the energy sector of Ukraine now in October 2023, so shortly before we enter the winter period in Ukraine, the figures I got were that around about 50% of the energy infrastructure, including huge parts of production capabilities, production sites have been destroyed. Partly the system, including supply lines, transformers, or also production utilities have been repaired, but only partly. So the situation for the energy sector, so at the beginning of winter 2023-24 is worse so than last year, and we already saw earlier than last year systematic attacks by Russian armed forces again on the energy infrastructure in Ukraine. To introduce our today's discussion into the big issue of recovery plans and how this fits to the needs of the existing and suffering energy system of Ukraine, to introduce our discussion, we could get as participant, but only with a video, Oleksandra Azarkhina. She's the Deputy Minister for Communities, Territories and Infrastructure in Ukraine. So you will see her on the screen, but you will have possibilities also to discuss after her video with two Ukrainians. One is here with us, not online, but in Berlin. It's Maria Repko. She is the Deputy Executive Director for the Center of Economic Strategy. And from Kiev online, we will have Artem Nekrasov participating. Artem is the CEO of a company which was founded by the state. It's a state company, the Guaranteed Buyer. And this company is the intermediary between those companies in Ukraine producing renewable electricity and those who are buying the renewable electricity. So it's a young company, but meanwhile with a very strong position in this field of also greening the energy sector of Ukraine. For Germany, we had some changes in our program. Unfortunately, Jochen Flasbarth could not make it and will not join us today. But I'm happy that the chief of the task force, the head of the task force Ukraine in the Ministry for International Cooperation, Ulrike Hopp-Nishanka, joined us. I always wanted to meet her. It's a good opportunity also. Last but not least, we have one of my European friends and colleagues, Torsten Wöllert, I would say if somebody in the European institutions knows really deeply the situation and the developments in the energy sector and the energy market and the EU integration of Ukrainian energy market, then this is Torsten Wöllert. So I'm happy to present you this panel, and I would now like to give the floor or to open the screen for the video of Oleksandra Azarkhina.
Dear friends, colleagues and partners, thank you very much for having me at this event. It's a great question. Ukraine and us, what does the Russian aggression mean to Europe? For sure, it's a challenge. It's the life-changing challenge. We've made our lives, not only in Ukraine, but also all over the European Union, different. We see this war as one of the biggest crime and one of the worst things, together with many others which Russia did. They turned our attention from the questions of the climate change, for the questions of the global famine, from the questions of the overall development of the humanity for the better future, to the issues we have, how better protect our critical national infrastructure, how better fight the kamikaze drones, how better protect our cities from the dangerous missiles. That's one of the biggest crimes. I would rather talk to you about the way how can our cities be more resilient for the climate mitigation, but not how our cities can be more resilient when the enemy is attacking your heating system, your energy system. Yes, we're changing, and we're changing for the reason. And the main thing we need all to say is to make sure that we remember for what we are fighting. And we are not only fighting with Russia, we are fighting with the world corruption. We are fighting for the common values, the values of the liberal countries, the values of the countries which respect the personality, the personal liberties, the ability to make the things different way. So I'm really very grateful for organizing to raising these questions. I will try to give a bit of the details what is going on with our system regarding the way we are trying to balance energy system, how we are trying to make sure that Ukrainian cities and industry have the access to the energy, but also how we are trying to make it in an environmentally friendly way, to make sure that the facilities, the dirtiest facilities, will not just rebuild the way they were, how we are making the system more open and not only environmentally friendly, but also more diversified, more open and transparent. So, energy security. The challenge of the war and the Russian terrorism directly aimed at destroying the energy infrastructure have been added to the global challenges associated with energy transformation. The task of the terrorists is to make the lives of Ukrainian communities unbearable. The same about the European Union. They knew that Ukraine were exporting the electricity. They knew how our cheaper electricity was important for the European markets. They knew how Europe is dependent on them. But that wasn't what they were looking for. They're looking for the proper imperial conquering war. So, to deprive them to their will to resist and to destroy civilized life in our communities and in our countries. Nevertheless, despite the incredibly evil efforts made by Russia, Ukrainian communities demonstrate extraordinary resilience, and we are working hard to strengthen this resilience. The ministry team developed the Community Energy Sustainability Program, which aims to help Ukrainian communities respond to Russian terrorism and the global challenges of the green transition. This program is aimed at maximum decarbonization of municipal and energy infrastructure, decentralization of energy generation, development of renewable energy sources, and use of modern technologies. I would rather go into details describing that in Ukraine, in the majority of the cities, you still cannot control the temperature in your apartment during the winter, only by opening the window. Why so? Because our systems historically was very centralized. That made some things a bit cheaper, but in many cases it's all about non-sustainable solutions. smart grids, and decarbonized municipal transport infrastructure. That's the core. In the first stage, the program envisaged the maximum use of the existing infrastructure of Ukrainian cities for the implementation of highly efficient cogeneration of electric and thermal energy, generation of energy from renewable sources, taking into account the local morphology of resources, energy use of sewage sludge and organic waste. The program measures will solve several problematic issues at once, providing sustainable energy for critical infrastructure and economic development of communities, decarbonizing such development, strengthening the dynamics of economic growth through sufficient energy supply of local businesses, and solving local environmental problems. The developed infrastructure of district heating in Ukrainian cities allows using it for the development of distributed and flexible electricity generation. Together with the decentralized energy generation, we are working hard to support our energy grid and protect it. We were grateful to German partners for the air defense. The air defense is still the #1 priority for the energy security in our country. But we do understand that together with the domestic protection of the kamikaze drones in Russia, we need to build a passive defense as well. It's a hard task. No one were in the place where Ukraine now, but many of you can learn from Ukrainian war, because we do see the challenges the last winter, the winter we will have now, and we need to be well protected. Powerful but outdated district boiler houses with an installed thermal capacity reaching 150 megawatts and more, and traditional design for large water heating boilers. Water heated in this way with the help of the powerful electric pumps installed at district boiler houses is transported through a network of pipelines to consumers. Such district boiler houses occupy large areas and will work better for Ukrainian communities. Using these facilities and infrastructure, it's possible to quickly deploy highly efficient small to medium capacity cogeneration plants that are not only capable of providing the necessary thermal energy for heating, but also can produce enough electricity to power the pumps and have a surplus to provide electricity to the local grids. I also would like to say a few words about the role of the German businesses. German business is traditionally quite present in Ukraine, bringing the access to the technologies, bringing the access to the finances. And we are grateful for all businesses which stayed in Ukraine, which still working here, making sure that the employees, either the Ukrainians or Germans, are cared. And I do believe that together with the German businesses, we can build more interesting and innovative solutions for the energy security. Germany showed its resilience as well. We know that the last winter was harsh for you as well. We know how Germany, as many other European countries, are suffering because of the war. We know that we all understand what is the source of this suffering, and we do all understand that we need to unite our efforts to build better, more resilient systems, the system which will allow us to fight the enemy and also at the same time to fight for the welfare of our citizens. Our citizens need to be well secured, either in terms of the basic services, either in terms of the basic security. So really, I do appreciate the ability to talk to you. The last points, I will just refer to the 3 things which are core now. Even for the energy security, the air defense is still on the top. If we're talking about our vision, how to make the system more sustainable, yes, we're talking about the decentralized energy generation, and we're talking about the passive defense. We also understand that together with the businesses, with innovation institutes, the researchers, we can make better solutions for all of us. And Ukraine can be a good place to test the newest technologies, and we're ready to cooperate, to be real partners. Thank you very much. I do understand that it's difficult times for all of us, and thank you for being with us. In these dark times, the light is more visible. Thank you.
So after these words from Kiev, we have our participant online, Dobrý den, Artem. Hello, привіт. Can you hear me already?
Доброго дня, так чую.
Okay, so we will have this discussion here in English and Ukrainian. Artem will speak Ukrainian. So you will partly need your headphones. After this introduction, I would like to add that, so based on my experiences last winter in Ukraine, it is not possible to compare energy shortage in Germany or in the EU with the situation in Ukraine. So millions of Ukrainians had to survive the winter with little heating, with interruption of electricity supply, so in cold houses and without light in the winter. That's something what the Germans still are not able to really understand, yeah, what this means if they are talking about their problems. Regarding these experiences in Ukraine from last winter, I would like to ask Mrs. Ulrike Hopny-Schanka what is in the discussion so as part of the big recovery plans. So recovery is a big issue. Recovery will matter. But what matters mostly in Ukraine, and not only in the electricity production sector, but also in other infrastructures of Ukraine which are necessary to supply so to make normal life in Ukrainian cities possible. So how are you able to develop the recovery plans and in the same time to respond to these emergency situations which will become more urgent in the upcoming winter?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question, and thank you for having us here for this conversation. What I can probably contribute to the discussion is how does the international community coordinate, and what is the role of the German government within this? Okay, no, it's not for me. I'll just carry on. And let me start by this. Of course, the recovery planning is done by the Ukrainians. So we have the honor and the obligation to stand by them and support them in this very difficult time. And we can do our best to be efficient and effective in doing so, but the real planning in where are the priorities, what needs to be done in order to support people on the ground, in the cities, in the countryside, is of course prioritized and organized and coordinated by the Ukrainians. The coordination of the recovery efforts works in a layered system, if you will. If you want to start from the top, maybe to structure this a bit, you can see that there is, at the level of the G7 countries, a very strong effort to coordinate in a, I would say, unprecedented way, to make it really what we say in German, Chefsache, to be coordinated and well harmonized to support the Ukrainians in the best way possible, and not to end up in what happens sometimes in international assistance, that we get entangled in our different ways of providing assistance, and therefore then confusing our partners on the ground who have to struggle with a crisis situation anyway. So within the G7 you have different tracks, and there is a very important one on energy, and we'll talk about this later, of course. For BMZ, I can say that for us a very important coordination mechanism is the multi-donor coordination platform, in which Germany is represented by the State Secretary Jochen Flasbarth, who apologizes because he can't be here due to unforeseen other obligations. And in this platform, what is discussed at the moment a lot is how to connect the very short-term needs, which are very much on budget support, keeping the Ukrainian state afloat, keeping the Ukrainian administration going, keeping basic services being provided, and how to connect that to the long-term transformation. And that is a real challenge because so much attention and focus and resources go every day into keeping things working and repairing, fixing destroyed infrastructure. Sasha was just speaking about the passive protection networks that are being set up, the nets that are being provided, the structures that are being provided to keep energy infrastructure safe in the upcoming campaign that many of us expect. But how to go towards the long-term planning and how to leave behind the big numbers that sometimes are quite scary for all of us when we look at the damage and needs assessments that come up with billions and billions of damages already, but rather to look at the assets and to look at what works on the ground and strengthen that. And that is very important because it leads us to looking at the local level, at the decentralized level, at the resilience of the people and how to strengthen them, how to work with them in order to keep their communities and the municipalities going. And we'll talk about that a bit later, but I won't keep on going now. Thank you.
Thanks. So getting organized and have a clear structure also probably matters more than ever for Ukraine, and it's good to hear about it. I would like to introduce now the CEO of the Guaranteed Buyer, Artem Nekrasov. I announced him already. I think Artem can really contribute to us, for us to understand what is, first of all, what are the needs in Ukraine for grid stability and energy security. But also he can report a bit about developments around the renewable sector, because his company has a clear focus to enable the better development of the renewable sector in Ukraine. It started not only now during the war, it started well before. But what has changed in Ukraine, to my experience, is that meanwhile you do not need green politicians to go to Ukraine and to advocate renewables or decentralization or efficiency. If you meet nowadays the mayors of big cities, they explain to you, to the green politician, why a renewable and especially also decentralized system is much more robust in a period of war and creates more resilience. At least I also learned about this from Artem. Please, Artem, the floor is yours.
Доброго дня, пані Ребека. Доброго дня, леді та джентльмени. Артем Некрасов, керівник гарантованого покупця. Я дякую вам за запрошення на цей захід, бо питання посилення енергетичної безпеки нашої країни, адаптації українського законодавства до європейських норм та інтеграції українських ринків з європейськими, що, як нам здається, дасть посилення і інституційної спроможності всіх учасників ринків, є одним з головних пріоритетів у роботі нашої компанії. Для тих, хто не знає, наша компанія «Гарантований покупець» є головним і найбільшим трейдером електроенергії з відновлюваних джерел в Україні. В нашу балансуючу групу входять більше 1300 компаній з відновлюваних джерел енергії, загальною потужністю більше 7,5 гігават електричної енергії, що виробляють електричну енергію з сонця, вітру, біомаси та малих гідроелектростанцій. Якщо все ж таки повернутися до теми сьогоднішньої конференції, як вплинула ця війна на зміну та трансформацію енергетичної стратегії України? Вперше за історію країни в цьому році ми поклали в нову енергетичну стратегію відновлення та розвитку два основних фактори. Фактор перший – це, безумовне, питання енергетичної безпеки. Та фактор другий – це максимальна інтеграція українського енергетичного ринку з європейським. Рік тому ми пережили масові ракетні атаки по енергетичній інфраструктурі. І як наслідок ми відчули на собі перший блекаут в країні за всю історію незалежності. Для прикладу скажу, що рік тому, в жовтні 2022 року, лише в наш офіс, на жаль, прилетіло 2 бойових дрони камікадзе «Шахед». А на щастя, це пройшло без людських жертв. Тому базовою умовою нової енергетичної стратегії України стало впровадження заходів по створенню розповсюдженої, децентралізованої генерації з відновлених джерел енергії. Ми розуміємо, що коли ми побудуємо декілька тисяч малих та середніх об'єктів генерації з відновлюваних джерел енергії, то, в принципі, жодних ракет будь-якої країни-терориста не вистачить для того, щоб погасити нашу енергетичну систему. Другий підхід нашої стратегії – це максимальна інтеграція українського енергетичного ринку з європейським. Ще 16 березня 2022 року українська енергетична система синхронізована з європейською. Тобто, українська енергосистема офіційно приєдналась до єдиної енергосистеми Європи – НТСАІ. А літом цього року, літом 2023 року, в Україні було прийнято 2 важливих закони. Це, по-перше, закон щодо імплементації регламенту ЄС 1227, це закон про оптові енергоринки, тобто РЕМІТ, та законопроект про зелену трансформацію енергетичного сектору України. В розробці цих законів приймали активну участь і співробітники нашого підприємства. Ці закони, на наш погляд, відкривають як для нашого підприємства, так і для всієї галузі наступні можливості. Це можливість виходу на експорт зеленої електроенергії на ринки країн ЄС з січня 2024 року та запуск механізму гарантій походження, тобто маркування зеленого кіловата. При цьому експортний інтерфейс для нас не самоціль. Ми вважаємо, що це засіб, який надасть потужний поштовх розвитку економік як України, так і Європейського Союзу в цілому. Позавчора, 9 жовтня 2023 року, Європейська Рада ухвалила нову директиву з відновлювальної енергетики, яка передбачає збільшення частки відновлюваної енергії в загальному енергоспоживанні ЄС до 42,5% до 2030 року. Наскільки ми знаємо, в Європейському Союзі зараз працюють 3 основних політики по механізмам ціноутворення, що застосовуються та встановлюють ціну на викиди вуглецю. Це система торгівлі викидами, податок на викиди діоксиду вуглецю та механізм СЕБАМ, який почав тестуватися з жовтня цього року, тобто практично зараз. Враховуючи зазначене, ми вважаємо, що додання до європейського ринку ще одного джерела отримання електроенергії з відновлювальних джерел, безумовно, з рахуванням балансів наших країн, дефіциту конкретних зон, дасть додатковий стимул розвитку економіки. Що ще ми можемо запропонувати Європейському Союзу, крім децентралізації енергосистеми та зростання частки відновлювальних джерел генерації? У квітні цього року українське газосховище було сертифіковано за новими правилами ЄС, що дає нам можливість запропонувати потужності для зберігання запасів газу. По суті, ми можемо стати для ЄС своєрідним газовим сейфом Європи. Враховуючи пріоритет в будівництві вітрових та сонячних електростанцій, які ми зараз покладаємо в нашу енергостратегію, прописуємо в наших законах, а також пріоритет по будівництву установок зберігання енергії, та третій фактор – те, що Україна має значні запаси літію, що дає можливість розвивати потужність як по будівництву, так і по локалізації систем зберігання енергії, ми будемо дуже раді заходу на наш ринок з проектами по будівництву чи розробці корисних копалень провідних німецьких та європейських компаній. Головний пріоритет в цьому, який ми бачимо, це побудова більш сучасної, більш безпечної, децентралізованої та чистішої енергетичної системи, придатної як для майбутнього Net Zero, так і до максимальної інтеграції з ЄС. Я розумію, що багато чого потрібно буде ще зробити. Багато чого потрібно буде узгодити між Європейським Союзом та Україною. І перший пріоритет для нас – це пережити цю зиму під новими атаками з боку агресора. Але я дійсно вірю в те, що все, про що я сказав, це може бути реалізовано. І ми особисто робимо все, щоб запустити свою частину цієї трансформації при зеленому переході. Дякую.
Ja, danke schön. Sollen wir vielleicht Deutsch-Ukrainisch diskutieren, um nicht noch eine Sprache? English? English, okay. So it's for Maria. So I was a bit astonished because the translation is now into German, but we will continue. We keep it like this. So thanks, Artem, and yeah, it's. I think it's promising to see the reforms still taking place in the energy sector in spite of the challenges we face for the real system, the energy system. And it's probably one of the most advanced sectors. And I would like to ask Torsten, Torsten Wöllert, who works on the energy issues in Ukraine, at least since we created in Brussels the support group for Ukraine. So since nearly 10 years, nearly a decade. And you can meet him always if you go to Kiev, even in the times of war. So he's one of our volunteers, always at least as often as possible, working from Ukraine and in Kiev. Thanks for this. But so what's your evaluation of the developments? So what are the needs, the urgency needs? What can we do to support Ukraine for the upcoming winter better? And how do you judge the perspectives for, so to put it short, the Green Deal in the energy sector in Ukraine?
Yeah, дуже дякую. Thank you very much. Dankeschön. My name is Torsten Wöllert. I'm the energy counselor at the EU delegation in Kiev now. And as Rebecca said, I'm working normally from Kiev. And I have been there last winter, and I will be there the coming winter. So I will report to you directly on whether things work or not. I mean, short assessment, I think it's not just reforms, it's a mental revolution. I mean, when you hear the colleagues talking about it, they talk about a modern energy system. If you decentralized everything we heard. If you talked to speakers from Ukraine 5 years ago, it was more talking about how to run a Soviet legacy system. And of course, this is because of the war, because much of the infrastructure has been damaged. I wouldn't call it destroyed, it is, but half of it has been damaged. And everybody, including the president, but down to the taxi driver, they understand that this Soviet energy system is inefficient and highly vulnerable. So just one missile hit and half of a town has a blackout. And also, it's a revolution that, in German we say, der Strom kommt aus der Steckdose. Yeah, so, you don't care about where energy comes from. And because of the winter and because people had been warned, everybody now takes care of his or her own energy security. I don't know any Ukrainian who has not taken care, in one form or the other. Make your dacha, build something so that you can live there in the winter in case of need. Have some firewood or have some power banks or candles, whatever. So the engagement of the whole society on energy is extremely big, and it will not go away simply because we all expect that the next winter will be a repeat of the previous one, that Mr. Putin will send in his Iranian kamikaze drones and missiles, and everything he has, he will do to try to destroy the system. We have also heard from Oleksandra Azarkhina and other colleagues that Ukraine is very actively, of course, preparing for this. So I'm not so pessimistic because resilience is technology, it's organization, but it's also attitude. And we have heard it also in the previous panels. Ukrainian attitude is that we will not give up. And of course, I mean, when you are sitting in your apartment, and as I said, I was in the winter, I was in Kiev, and you have no light, you have no water, you have no heating, and you don't know for how long this will take, etc. Okay, you are prepared, you're also mentally prepared, but still it's pretty unpleasant. But this is not a reason to, I mean, this whole thing of shock and awe that Putin planned didn't work. So even if you have to suffer in the winter, it will not drive people out of the cities. This was the plan of Putin. And this winter, I think people are mentally prepared. The energy operators are physically, organizationally prepared. Of course, as Oleksandra Azarkhina said, the key is air defense. And of course, I'm privileged because I live in Kiev, and air defense in Kiev has greatly improved compared to when we started a year ago, when it was just, you know, you have the smartphone app which calls you, now you have to go to shelter. You go to shelter, they come out of the shelter, and the first thing you do, are the lights still on? So this is no longer like this because the hits have been much, much less than they were a year ago. And so, I mean, what we are discussing now, and I'm very glad also that the organizers put this energy session into this context, because this is where it belongs to. Energy is part of Putin's war. We have to win in energy to win the war. It's not only about tanks and missiles, it's also about resilience, it's also about people being able to live in the country. And for this you need energy, water, etc. We have seen a huge wave of international solidarity. And I mean, as you said, it's pretty unique. I mean, we are working now in a global coordinated effort led by the G7 countries, of course, including Germany, where we regularly coordinate what we supply. And when you look at what has been supplied, you see also the development that gives reason for optimism. I mean, we started with the immediate stuff, small generators, so that, you know, hospitals, schools have electricity, transformers, so that the electricity system can be kept up and running when there was an attack. But pretty soon after, we started to think about more systematically and say, well, we need, as Mr. Nekrasov said, a decentralized system. So what can we do to do it? And now we brought in some first big gas-fired turbines to at least keep the district heating system running and the water system running. So these companies, even if there is a complete blackout, they will have enough electricity produced by their own to keep the pumps running, to keep people warm. And this is a big difference. I can tell you, you know, when you have a bit of basic supplies, you feel much safer. And that is now being put in place. Of course, Ukraine is a huge country, not everywhere. And as I said, I'm privileged because I live in Kiev. But the next thing is already happening now. I mean, we are in the middle of the war. We are all preparing for the next winter. But we are also looking ahead. For instance, there's now an initiative in this G7 Plus platform, which we call it, which is essentially everybody who wants to help can go there and can help. And the G7 countries are coordinating. But also, you know, you have the big banks, you have Korea is there, everybody is there. And now there is an effort to supply, for instance, hospitals with solar PV solutions, because they all have generators, because, I mean, the first need was met, but it's a bit like, you know, like in medicine, first aid, and then you do the treatment. And now the hospitals, we are installing sustainable solar PV solutions, because we have all found that running these diesel generators is very expensive. And it's the municipal budget who has to carry this, so they are very much interested in installing this. And they're not waiting. I mean, they're reaching out. They're making the configuration, so once the material comes, it's ready to be installed, it's ready to help on the ground. And, you know, these are not engineers, these are not energy experts, these are just ordinary people who see that there is a problem. So that's why I'm fairly optimistic when it comes to the next winter. We will see what it means in the different regions, and that depends very much on air defense. For the more long-term thing, and this is, I mean, we're in the middle of the biggest war in Europe since the Second World War, and we are discussing the future. And we are discussing, for instance, how Ukraine can, or what are the practicalities actually, even the political process, but even the practicalities of Ukraine becoming a member of the European Union. We don't know yet when and how, but we are discussing it. And this is very positive. And the energy sector is a very good example of how you can do this. For instance, in the middle of the war, we connected our electricity systems. And we took some risk, because it may have caused blackouts, not only in Ukraine, but also in Germany and Poland, wherever. We had a very good teamwork. We did not have any blackouts. It saved, at a certain situation, it saved Ukraine's electricity system. And this is, you know, this kind of integration, which also Mr. Nekrasov mentioned, this kind of gradual integration into the European system, the European markets, I think this is a very pragmatic future for the country, and it demonstrates the added value of Ukraine for the whole European Union or European continent, however you may call it. Or Mr. Nekrasov mentioned, for instance, the gas storages, that I think it's now 2 billion cubic meters of gas which are stored in Ukraine by international traders, and they are available. So in case of need, you know, we have, the rules are clear, we have a good working system, so the gas can not only be used, can also be used anywhere in the European Union. And then it's a question of price, so normal market economic works, even in times of war. So maybe, because I'm so optimistic, maybe a few points. One thing is energy poverty. Ukraine has a huge problem with energy poverty, and it has also a huge problem traditionally, and it's not only in Ukraine and many other countries, with what I call energy populism. So essentially, which essentially translates into, well, look, in the Soviet Union, energy was free of charge, so why should I pay now? But the good thing is that that people understand, even intuitively, you have to invest in energy security. So I hope that Ukrainian politicians will find the courage to explain that energy is not free of charge. Energy needs to be produced. And the more local you produce, the easier it is to understand that it has a cost. Because if it comes just out of out of the socket, Strom aus der Steckdose, why should I pay? But objectively, there are many poor people, and the problem with energy poverty will grow because of the war and all the damages. So you need to address this. And this is something which is not often mentioned, but I think it's crucial. For all the reforms and all the investments that are needed, you need dedicated social support for energy consumers who are vulnerable, who are poor, who cannot pay the bills. And that's something which we have, for instance, done. We have created a dedicated fund for these purposes, a social protection fund for Moldova. And Germany has contributed, and the EU and Sweden, etc., to help the energy system become more sustainable. And then you have the financial means and the incentives to do what we have discussed, more decentralized, more local, using local resources, etc. And last thing, this new energy system is not only more safe and good for Ukraine, it's also, as Mr. Nekrasov said, it's becoming part of the European system. And this is a bit, I think energy is a front runner actually, because our economies are not very much integrated yet. But we have the same electricity system, we can have, we use storage facilities for gas, and what we are now discussing, and I hope we will see good progress next year, is that Ukraine can produce biomethane, which is also gas, but renewable gas, that it can export it, for instance, to Germany. In Germany, there's a big need because of decarbonization needs. And it offers also an economic development perspective for many reasons in Ukraine. So it's really win-win. And this you can do during the war. So that's why I'm relatively optimistic, not ignoring any of the challenges that lie ahead.
Thanks. And optimism matters. And so also, I would like to underline that I was really proud when the news came that the grids are connected. So there was a huge job behind this. It was so several years long process, and in the end, very much speeded up. And I would like Maria to answer a bit the question which has been mentioned, or the issue which, talk about the issue which also Torsten has mentioned. So Russia is, with all these attacks, is destroying the Soviet system when it comes to energy. So it's something what so is probably not intended, but it happens. Yeah? So they are so by force they are forcing us to integrate, but Ukrainians also so from my perception were met in a moment when they were really prepared for integration also in the energy market.
Works. Yeah, thank you for this question. Actually, the integration of energy grid was the first thing I thought about when you talked, Rebecca, about the reforms which are going on in the wartime, right? Ukraine has disconnected from the old Soviet grid like 3 or 4 days before the full-scale invasion. At the same night, you say, okay, but it was like really short period of time. Then for several weeks, we were running like an island. So Ukraine didn't have any connection with the any outer world. And then Ukraine was able to connect to the European Union grid. The prerequisites were really huge reforms, a lot of technical work, like years, and I guess hundreds of people involved in this, and then it allowed to first connect on a technical level and then even on a commercial level, allowing Ukrainian producers to sell the cheaper electricity to European market when European companies demanded it. So for the future, this is definitely a huge asset, and this is I would say, pretty much important sign for us that as Ukrainians we should not stop reforms even if something is going on, right? So war is not the reason to stop moving forward. It's the reason to start moving even faster. Today was mentioned a lot of things that I was going to talk about, but I would just emphasize one of them, because I think that you cannot talk enough about it, right? So just to give the background, how Ukrainian energy system looks like for those who don't know it, like I think pre-war, 50% of generation and 50% of consumption was satisfied by nuclear power plants. These are like these huge things that stand somewhere in the field, right, and pretty far away from the major cities. So the grid, the distribution network, is really important to keep people going on. And Russia specifically targeted this grid transformers, like these big, huge technical things. I'm not really a technical person, so I'm really sorry for my language, but I mean, this is sort of the understanding. So that's why it was very important for Ukraine to timely repair its grid. And the funny story about it is that the pre-war corruption case helped in it a lot. We had one guy who made an order for a very large quantity of transformators for one of the plants, and it was really just lying some, I don't know, unused in some of the warehouses. And then where the war came, this case of really outright corruption, it was put to good use, because these transformators, they were used to restore the power capacity. One of the main generation companies, the TAC, it was, I would say, cannibalizing its underutilized capacities in terms of power plants to make the repairs in its destroyed power plants, and also the same keeping the more or less sufficient level of the consumption. So yeah, it's very important to not stop to help Ukraine with the spare parts for these transformators, because we are actually at the end of the spare capacity. It was used last winter. So for this winter, it's important to protect the transformators. It's important to produce spare parts and the details needed to continue repairs. And of course, they mentioned gas turbines to allow the big cities to continue supply heat and water to the citizens. It's also super important. For example, I asked our Minister of Energy how much it would cost to, for example, run Kiev. They told me that it would be 3 to 4 gas turbines, each cost $20 million or 20 million euros. So it's not that big amount of money, I would say, if we compare to the rest of it. But actually, my expertise lies more not in energy, but in the general financial and fiscal resilience of the country and on fiscal needs of Ukraine. And when we were starting the discussion, talking about the level of destruction, talking about this assessment of the recovery needs, which I think is over 400 billion euros, which is like the crazy number. Now, I would just like to bring in now into comparison with what Ukraine actually has. For 2024 budget, all the total governmental capital expenditures are fixed at the level of 3 billion euros. This is if we compare to the GDP, to expected GDP. For example, before previous years, it was like 5% of GDP. Now it's 2% of GDP. So we all talk a lot about the reconstruction, the recovery, the enormous amount of funds which are to be put here and there. But in the reality, in the field, the situation is pretty gloomy. The same is correct for the consolidated budget. When we combine the state budget and the local budgets, the capital spendings are now at the very low level, extremely low level. Ukraine hopes to collect, to receive about 50 billion euros funding next year from different sources, from borrowings within the country, abroad, from the European Union UA facility, which we do really hope that it would be approved from the US. But we see that this could be really problematic for us. And the budget deficit, the total budget expenditures, they run as high as 80 billion. And only 40 billion of them could be covered by the internal sources. So the rest is the budget deficit. That is why this drastic decrease in the capital spending. The Minister of Finance just could not really afford to spend any additional hryvnia into any capital spending, even restoration or something like this. So that's why it's important. Yeah, that's the probably one of the emphasis which we would be happy to make is that we hope that private capital would step in, and in the energy sector in particular. I just had a talk, I would just have 1 more minute, and I had just a talk with the guys who have built industrial park in the Western Ukraine and had it insured by MIGA. MIGA is this international insurance agency which works from the US and which provides political and military risks insurance. So they have made, I think, half a year they were into this deal, due diligence and so on and so forth, but now we know that this could happen actually. So if investors are interested in going into Ukrainian energy sector, given that it is already connected to the European Union and we are already doing a lot of reforms, so probably now it's the right time for both Ukrainian government and the private investors from different countries to come up with the projects that could be insured, like the bankable projects, which could be funded partly by the international organizations, for example, within this second pillar of the European Union facility, or with some other funds, and go to MIGA or to DFC or to other insurance agency and start to create the difference in Ukrainian private part of the energy sector. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. One last question in this context to Artem before I open for the audience. Artem, so you work with younger companies, investors in the green energy sector. Have you seen recent investments into the sector domestically?
Дякую, Ребека, за запитання. Я би поділив би інвестиції, які заходять зараз в сектор, по все ж таки секторам зеленої електроенергії. Найбільші проекти, які запустились протягом пройдешнього і цього року, це проекти вітрової електричної галузі. Частина з них – це ті проекти, які були не закінчені ще до війни. Тобто під ці проекти були підготовлені будівельні майданчики, під ці проекти було обладнання, але війна і головний фактор – це закриття морських портів, не дало змоги добудувати і запустити ці проекти в життя. Тому більше половини цих проєктів – це проекти, які були ще до війни. Але зараз ми бачимо, що до нас заходять як місцеві інвестори, так і інвестори з країн ЄС. Їх також більше за все ж таки цікавить питання, якщо ми говоримо про комерцію, про бізнес, саме вітрової генерації. Однак війна вдала свої корективи. Дуже багато місцевого бізнесу – це малі фабрики, це торгові центри та інші підприємства. Вони, як правильно сказав пан Торстен, зрозуміли, що ціна кіловата, коли ти працюєш на дизельному чи бензиновому генератору, вона дуже велика. Тому за цей рік ми бачимо, що дуже багато місцевого бізнесу побудували для закриття безпосередньо своїх потреб здебільшого сонячні електростанції, які, по-перше, закривають саме потреби цього бізнесу. І лише після цього вони приймають рішення по можливості виходу на вільний ринок для можливості продажу цієї електричної енергії. Для стимулювання цього процесу саме було запущено ще 2 фінансових моделі. Ми розуміємо, як правильно було сказано, що є якісь короткострокове питання. Це питання зараз під час війни. Але якісь стимули, які дадуть можливість стимулювати цю галузь. Ми кажемо саме про зелену енергетику, зелену трансформацію на майбутнє. Тобто з строком десь 5, 10, 15 років. Тому починаючи з січня наступного року, 2024 року, шляхом застосування нових законів, в тому числі закону про зелену трансформацію, будуть запущені 2 фінансових інструменти. Це система нетбілінг, яка, як ми знаємо, працює і в країнах Європи, Європейського Союзу, яка дає можливість використовувати енергію з відновлених джерел, по-перше, для самостійного споживання, і дає можливість продавати залишки електричної енергії, яка в тебе буде лишатися на свободному вільному ринку. Друга модель, яка буде запущена також з січня наступного року, тобто 24-го, це друга модель підтримки, яка буде запускатися для проєктів з відновленої енергетики. Зараз у нас працює модель підтримки зеленого тарифу, фіден-тариф. Додатково з наступного року буде запущена ще програма по Feed-in Premium. І от той мікс, який, як ми бачимо, дасть можливість впливати на якісь довгі інструменти і давати можливість розвивати нові проекти по ВДЄ в цій країні.
So, Dankeschön. Und nun gehören die Referenten Ihnen. Now the panelists are for you and you can ask your questions. Please.
Gary Porushkin, Berlin Economics. I have a question to the energy experts. How at the moment, so not for reconstruction or not for the large-scale future reconstruction, how do you see energy decentralization currently during the upcoming winter in terms of green perspective? So does the energy decentralization lead to more use of environmental unfriendly diesel generators, for example, rather than solar PVs, because the capital costs are high for solar PVs and because of long amortization periods. So how do you see this? Thank you.
Let's take one more question immediately. Sonja Schreiner.
Mich interessiert, wie weit das Gesetz zur Dezentralisierung in der Ukraine, was noch unter Poroschenko durchgesetzt worden ist, auch jetzt in Kriegszeiten gegriffen hat oder sich ausgeweitet hat und wie weit das nützlich ist oder eben, wenn es nicht stattfindet, für die sogenannte Revolution in der Energieversorgung.
So Sonja wants to know how robust is the reform for decentralization and whether it's still respected, this reform process, and how it can also contribute to the decentralization of the energy system. So who wants to reply on the energy expert question? Maybe Artem first and Torsten adds.
Якщо можна, я почну. Я скажу порівняння. Якщо взяти пройдешню зиму 22-го року, і поглянути навколо мене, як офіс, в якому ми знаходимося, так два офіси, які знаходяться біля нашого. То пройдешню зиму 22-го року всі підприємства, які знаходилися в будівлях, проходили, як правильно було сказано, на дизельний генератор. За цей рік всі криші і всі панелі навколо центру, там, де ми знаходимося, накриті сонячною генерацією. Весь бізнес і всі підприємства навколо вміють рахувати. І друге питання, коли в тебе є свій істочник, своє джерело енергії, від якого ти не залежиш ні від кого, ти розумієш, що при всіх ризиках, які можуть бути, як військових, так і економічних, ти все ж таки більш захищений. Тому в порівнянні 2 роки. Зима пройдешнього року – дизель-генератори, зима цього року практично у половини бізнесу, який нас оточує, є криша з сонячними панелями.
Same observation. You even have now people putting solar panels on balconies and things, you know, and this is new. And it is just because many of the generators are very expensive to run. You have to buy diesel. And also because it was bought when everybody was buying, so sometimes the quality of the generators was not very high. And also you need to repair them, so it's much easier to replace them. We will see what will be the experience this winter. We all hope, of course, that we will not need this so that we will have no blackouts. But when you have these panels, and when they are, you know, on your shop, on a hospital, etc., they will be used during peacetime. They will be useful now, during wartime, but they will be used for peacetime. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people who get experience with this. So, and this is what I mean a bit, this mental revolution is happening. It goes down to the taxi driver. You know, you can check it. You go to Kiev, ask a taxi driver, I think 50% chance they will talk about it.
So I was visiting in August with one of the employees of Guaranteed Buyer, an old friend of mine, I have to admit. He lived in Bucha, but he had to leave, and we visited Bucha, Irpin, and also Moschun. So that's really, in German terms, it's a village, yeah, and it's not a rich village. So it's a big village, and if you now walk down from the entry of the village down to the river Irpin, you will find at least on every second roof of these still in repair process dachas, you will find photovoltaic. And that's quite impressive. I'm still wondering who is behind, how this decentralization worked so obviously. But it's very, very good to see this modernization in the villages after destruction.
And it really means what we in Germany like to call Energiewende in the heads of people is there. They are doing it. Of course, they do it because they are more or less forced to do it. But this change of mind will not go away. And what will be the challenge also for the international partners to support the people with good advice, maybe with a bit of money, but money is not the most important thing. It's how to do this and how to organize it beyond your own dacha. You know, people know how to do this on their own dacha, on their balcony, etc. But how to make a system out of this and how for them to work, for instance, with a guaranteed buyer and stuff like this.
But that's connecting also to the other question. So the decentralization, so the new amalgamated communities or Romadas, and how does it fit to this decentralization and energy revolution?
Yeah, of course, energy decentralization, decentralized generation, small generation, this is a very big thing in Ukraine right now, and understandable why. In general, as far as I understand, your question was about the decentralization reform in general and if it's still in place or not. So in the wartime, it's crucial that some part of the functions are becoming more centralized. This is something inevitable. We cannot run the war effort by a lot of heads of amalgamated communities, right? So some centralization, some degree of centralization, that's an inevitable thing. And I think everyone with whom I spoke in the civil society, we are in a very much support of the decentralization reform, but at the same time, there are trade-offs. I will give you the most recent example. This is the tax for the salaries of military personnel, right? So about a quarter of Ukrainian budget, of the, like total Ukrainian budget, right? That like 20% or 25%, it goes to the military salaries. These military salaries are taxed with the personal income tax. This personal income tax, it is distributed in different parts between the general government budget and the local budgets. Therefore, we see that if the military regiment is situated in some local gromada, it might double, triple, or increase its income by 10 times with no real need or no real new function which this gromada has, right? So we see that some gromadas, they were really responsible ones, and they were providing these funds to support drones, to support the purchases of other munition for the military purposes. Some of them were really gromadas that, like Nikopol, for example, or Mykolaiv, or the other cities which are situated in very close to the conflict line, and so they were really in need of these funds to make some repairs. But what we also saw in a really scary scale, that the number of gromadas who were using these proceeds to renovate parks, to build some statues, to buy some expensive car, and so on and so on and so forth. So this is definitely not the way that we would like the funds available to Ukrainian budget to be used now, right? So we need it to be used for the defense and for the restoration of gromadas and of people's houses which were destroyed. So that's why this discussion started, right? And it's now at a very heated stage. I don't know the outcome just yet, but yeah, we are in the very heated stage of the discussion. So just to wrap up, the decentralization is great in the peace times. In war times, there might arise some trade-offs where some centralization of power looks better to me.
Danke. Thanks. So one addition, yeah, from the organization with a lot of money compared to the Ukrainians.
Well, right. I mean, in the end, I think we established here that the numbers that are estimated to be needed are so high that actually no aid budget will cover that. So I think what is therefore so important is that we really have this conversation jointly with the private sector. Now, during war times, this is a very complicated conversation because, of course, private sector is interested in contracts for recovery and reconstruction projects. They are interested if there's insurance, as the example of MIGA shows, but this is a very difficult conversation because in the end, somebody has to fund the insurance, right? And that requires funding as well. It's not for free. So you also have to really make sure that you have the best leverage for the funding, and I think that's really important to explore this. But what is also really important is the capacity, and you pointed out that sort of everybody becomes an expert and has the idea. I mean, I think one thing, and this is really important, the attitudinal change, the mental change is there, and that will be the driver of reforms. And as you say, there is no going back. You know, so at peace times, hopefully soon, we will hopefully not see a reversal of saying, let's go back to a centralized energy supply system, of course. But how then to go about it, and what are the energy sources? Are they nuclear? Are they renewable, etc.? This will be a very difficult question, right? And it's one that needs preparation and discussion and debate and how to go forward. So for that, I think what is also required is creating a lot of capacities and expertise in the country. That's something we can also contribute already now to have the debate and to build up the expertise that is required, not only for repairs as we have it now, but also for energy efficiency, so to save as much as possible energy, to avoid energy loss wherever possible in the meantime, and then think ahead of the future system of energy supplies. And that, I think, is really important to all of us at the moment and connects to the decentralization reform. Decentralization reform is not only about the legal requirement, it's also about the capacities in the municipalities to be able to implement. And that's why we look a lot at the capacities on the ground to make, you know, the municipalities really able to implement the tasks that are at hand, and then to find the good balance in this negotiation between centralization now during war times, a very strong focus on anti-corruption work, and we often see, you know, the reason of anti-corruption as an explanation for more centralization. I think anti-corruption goes both ways because you find corruption at all levels, so that can't be an excuse. We have to make sure that services are provided as close as possible to the people on the ground, right? Because then they really meet the needs. And I think that's also where, in the end, you know, the reforms will continue to go forward too. Thank you.
Yeah. One remark and then one last question, but one remark shortly.
One remark on decentralization. People know how to deal with their own dacha. They may know how to deal with their own school, but what would really help is to empower the municipalities in this sense of, take the German word Stadtwerke and you understand what I mean. And this is not existing.
Yeah, thank you. It's rather a comment. Stefan Kegelbein, German Eastern Business Association. Ms. Hopni-Shankar, you're totally right when it comes to insurance and so on and so forth. But much more important is first that companies sees a common business case with Ukrainian partners. That's a main important issue. And just to maybe finish with a positive outlook, we know, I know personally at least 4 projects. 2 are from wind park developers from Germany planning investments in Ukraine. A solar park developer planning investments right now in Ukraine. And rather new, we see that in 2 or 3 weeks when it comes to rehabilitation on hydropower plants and signing something in relation to hydrogen, common projects in developing of using of hydrogen. So there is, company sees business cases in Ukraine currently. And that is the most important thing, that we have this, and then of course insurances and all the others is needed. But maybe to finish with this positive outlook beside all problems we know.
So thanks for all participants, also for the contributions from our audience here. Do pobачення to Kiev, and good luck. May the force be with you all the time. Yes, for me, obviously, working like Torsten since long time around the energy issues in Ukraine, it's good to see these new developments and the ambitions also, and that the war has not changed these longing for a better and modern state, but has increased the Ukrainian ambitions. So good luck for all our Ukrainian friends, and weapons to close the sky, especially also above the nuclear power plants, which Ukraine today still needs. See you in the next panel. Bye-bye.